last talk of the session by Mr. Shourav Das from Alcon.
Thank you so much. So at the onset, I would really want to thank Dr. Rohit Shetty for giving me and us the opportunity to present before you. My name is Shourav Das, for those who haven't got the opportunity to work closely with. And I head up the practice development team of Alcon India. We are a 5-year-old team, 5 of us, and collectively we have 50 years of experience in eye care. And the only thing that we do in this organization is practice development, which is integrating any advanced technology into the practice through patient education, staff training, and practice support. And what I'm going to present in the next 10 minutes is the best practices that I've learned from most of you all in this entire journey, which is very easy to implement, and you'll be able to, by implementing this, you'll be able to quickly improve and improvise your practice. So starting from the very first thing that comes up, what does a patient primarily expect from a practice, much beyond the outcome? The first thing that a patient primarily expects in a practice is that somehow you arrange to make them feel important, and that's the primary thing. Subconsciously or consciously, if you are able to, or practices who are able to bring this importance factor into the practice, find themselves to be very successful and have a stronger foothold. And for the others, there's a good amount of patients who would get turned off. And these are the reasons, the top 5 reasons based on a survey, because of which a patient can actually get turned off in a practice. And here is the number 1. The first reason is impolite staff. The second happens to be excessive waiting period of time. And the third happened to be a big surprise for all of us when we did this survey, which happened to be ill-maintained washrooms. And there's a logic which we'll talk to you a little later. Then came in the lack of surgeon involvement into this entire position. And the only last one happened to be the perceived disproportionately charged fees, but probably you would think would have figured out to be first. Having this thing in mind, I think we'll start off with the first pearl, which happened to be the front desk management. The primary job of a front desk person, the receptionist, is to smile. I mean, they have to learn some content of hospitality, and the primary job of them is just to smile. You fake it till you make it. Often when we visit practices, and proudly a surgeon would, introduce me to meet Shanta. She has been working with us for 20 long years, and she's wonderful in medical record keeping, and she is wonderful. Not a single thing has missed across. And I would say hello, and she would just make a movement, and she would just give a very tiny amount of smile, only to wish, I would have really wished that, if there was a spatula to make them smile a little broader. And I would say, this is not the right job for her. So the primary job, if it's something that you can really coach upon in your practice, is that teach them how to smile. Second, telephone and the reception, they are absolute antonyms. You cannot afford to have it together. You cannot be attending both the things at the same time, and you will be doing injustice to both of them, having a telephone and just answering the person who is in front of you. So the first thing that you would probably want to do is go back and separate out your telephone from your front desk, and you'll see the overall experience of the patient turns out to be amazingly awesome. Front desk, if you're in a position where so the general mantra is that you don't need to have a large front desk. That's not what is really needed. What you really need is a front desk which is clean, which doesn't have orphan papers and cups lying here, and that's what really turns on a patient, when somebody is there at the front desk. And last, please engage persons with pleasant personality. It really matters, and that investment is really worth of it. Did you know 7 out of 10 purchase decisions in LASIK practice happens in telephone, which is the typical window shoppers, which probably you would ignore, or probably think that this is one of the regular cold calls. But little that you know that the statistics is as high as 7 out of 10. If you want to do a quick litmus test of how your practice health is in terms of the footfall, try this. Try to make a mystery call, pretending that you're a patient or a caregiver, and try to see how your practice fares in these questions. And you'll get an exact idea and the reason why the footfalls is going the way it is. Here's another survey that came out. This is again in US, where a bunch of people were asked, what are the first things, couple of things that you would really want a practice to look after? And the highest thing that came up was attending to the patients was the first thing that came up. And that comes to our next pearl, which happens to be having a floor manager in place. Now, this concept is growing extremely popular these days. Floor managers are primarily persons who have access to each and every department of the hospital, and primarily, they are the point of contact for the patients. Now, this is what happens if your normal check-in, check-out time in a practice for the primary examination is beyond 90 minutes, your patient tend to do 2 things. One is visit the washroom, and that's where if you can figure out the logic why it turned out to be the third point, in the entire survey. And the second thing is they tend to ask a patient, the next person who he sees or she says in the practice, "Bhai, mera number kab aayega?" And that becomes, most of the times when they don't have an answer, that becomes a grievance and that becomes an unhealthy experience. Floor manager exactly does that task. Who is the point of contact where the patient can go or the caregiver can go and gets an answer to his question, and also make sure that all the bottlenecks are cleared in this entire journey and the entire flow is pretty much smooth. Here's a picture that I picked up from Narayana Nethralaya. They have interwoven this entire concept of flow managers very interestingly. Each one of them has a target, by the way, not of patient conversion, but getting reviews. And they are appraised at the end of year by the number of reviews that they are able to collect. The practice outlook. This is something which is going important as well. If you feel, if you have not done your name board, if your name board is not correct at this point in time, don't wait for the New Year and Diwali to make it happen. Please do it now. You have no idea how patients or the caregivers or the newer generation people are taking an impression or an idea of your name board. Don't be under the impression that your goodwill is so tall that you don't need a name board, or the name board, even if it is not lit up well enough, it's perfectly fine. Please go back and see if you can really course correct this particular thing. Have every team members give them a clean uniform and designation. Most important thing, you give them, every individual can be given a designation. Here's a list of designations that are put forward, like even somebody who is sweeping the floor can be called as housekeeping, or somebody who is repairing the electrician or the plumbers can be called as maintenance. But each one of them can potentially have a name and a designation for your entire practice. Here's the seating formula. This is the mantra that we really recommend. If you have a place, the first thing is that you give them enough quantity of chairs and a comfortable one. If that's not possible, well, this is a very idealistic thing. If that's not possible, give them enough quantity of chairs and less comfortable, which is fine. But the worst thing to do is give them extra spacious couches and just few of them and others are waiting outside. Really doesn't work out really well. Most of the practices, everybody, in fact, you have waiting lounges in your place, most of the time when we visit a practice or my team visit a practice, we realize that what they play is actually news channels. And today we all know what news channels is all about. It talks about different, aggressive contents like, rapes and murders and politics and so on and so forth. And just imagine what happens to your patients. They are seeing this and your check-in, check-out time, by the way, is more than 60, 90 minutes. They're watching this. They're in a different frame of mind. They're called in. And then they've been made to have this discussion and say that, you have cataract, you have to shell out 45,000 rupees. And they are not in the correct frame of mind. So what probably you can do is replace your news channels tomorrow by anything which is soothing, like a music channel or a travel channel. Travel channel works out to be best in this particular case. If you have a video on your services, don't loop it too often. Every video that you're looping more than 8 times an hour is fatiguous. Try to make a mix of some good content and your service videos. It will really work out well. In India, unfortunately, the minimal amount of conversation that is done by an optometrist is only 3 things: chin up, chin down, light ke samne dekho. That's the only thing that is done. And there's a huge potential and scope where our optometrists can be actually engaged into much more fruitful conversations in our practice. If you would see at most of the places across different countries, they do such interesting conversations and push the entire patient journey forward. So I think that's something that we can really probably look forward where we can coach them to have more meaningful conversations, including recommendations. Currently, this is what your normal investment approach would be, which is correct. You end up investing maximum. Investing maximum in infrastructure, then on equipments, and then a very tiny proportion of that amount, you invest on staff. When I say invest, I mean the time, energy, and money, the focus. It's time that most of you should actually think about investing a little bit more amount of focus towards staff. It will really be rewarding. Comes to the next question, next point, which is pearl number 6, which is the patient counseling department. If there's something that you really can invest after a microscope and a phaco machine, it's investing in a good counselor. It's not only about the entire chair time that the person would take away, but it actually helps in very interesting, fruitful conversations and very interesting conversions that can take place. Here's how the science works. If it's a rectangle table, and we recommend that most of your counselors should have a round table. If it's a rectangle table, the conversation and the science is that I listen, I tell, you listen. That's what you do. But if it's a round table, it is, let's take a decision together. And that's what exactly a counselor does to your practice, is become a part of the family of the patient, and that decision is taken together. They play a very critical role, and you should harp upon it for sure. These are some of the common illusions that is found in internet, and unfortunately this one as well, which is recommendation is selling. Now this is so wrong. Recommendation is something, which every surgeon should practice. Most of the times you're stumped by, a question where a patient says that, whatever you say, I'll go for that package. And this is most of the time that happens. And here are two different recommendation styles I'll quote. Most of the time, I see here patient practices or surgeons saying, when this question is asked, they would say, whatever you do, I'll do the best. Here's some of the different recommendation styles, and I'll use the same thing, and this is what many of them use. They would say, if I had been in your position, for my daughter, I would have gone for a bladeless LASIK. However, whatever you choose, I'll do my best. And it makes a world of difference. Most of the time, patients actually want that strong recommendation. They really do not want that weak as you like it. They would probably not walk away with a bladeless LASIK procedure, but they will really walk away with a lot of clarity, that this practice offered. And everybody has a unique recommendation style, which actually can be practiced by your own way. And everybody in this entire patient journey can actually have a recommendation statement and can be potentially be used for recommending in this entire journey. Then the next come is a concept that, I heard few of the speakers also coming up, is having the meaningful conversation, which is the post-operative counseling. Most of the time, we tend to let them go. Now, here's the opportunity for most of you to bring that wow factor, not the clinical one, but the non-clinical one. And talking about a little bit of cataract, many times, you would see your multifocal and toric patients would have not multiplied as you would have thought it should have. What really probably would have gone really wrong is that patient, though got a clinical wow factor, I'll just take 2 more minutes, did not get that non-clinical wow factor, which means he or she probably thought this is how life was supposed to be. And that's where that additional 5 minutes that you spend after the counseling, after the surgery is done, is very useful, and which is when the patient starts telling to the number of patients, wow, you know what, I had a multifocal lens. And that is how the practice multiplies, because they are now going and talking it to more number of people. Caregivers are really important. Please do not ignore them. They really matter to the practice. And every move that you talk about in terms of the caregivers, the attention that you give, the analogies that you use are really important. Marketing your practice. External marketing, of course, is very important. But the only tip of the day I would like to give you is that do not do it yourself. Give it to a subject matter expert. It looks very simple, but this really requires an expertise. But one of the best things that you can probably do is internal marketing, and a lot of different ways that you can probably do that, because the best way is word of mouth publicity. Tiny things that you see on the right hand side of the screen is a new arrival board that most of you can do. You can probably get a new biometry machine that is done, and you can just mention that just arrived in this particular hospital. The patient will tend to understand that this hospital which is constantly upgrading and so on and so forth.
So
one more minute. Yeah, I'll just take
sir.
1 more minute. Yeah. Staff education, very important. I think this was again one survey that came up which talked about, just a second. Yes. Staff education tends to be most important. It not only helps you battle the attrition rate, but it overall increases the productivity of the hospital. And and Alcon has been committed for this endeavor, and most of the places we have been trying to bring a lot of in-clinic staff education programs so that the overall experience of the patient is really high. And the last one, which is a survey that came out really fresh out of the oven, which is from July, and this is an Indian survey done by IMS. Did you know this was a survey, a good amount of patients, sample size, 6 out of 10 patients are willing to pay 70,000 rupees for an LVC procedure. And this is fact, which means it's not all about the price, it's all about the conversation that you had with the practice. And that's why the last tip of the day is, do not be reluctant to charge appropriately for your services, because what you should be probably focusing about is the value, and value is the non-tangible component. Value is basically benefit minus cost, and that positive experience is the only thing that will actually bring that patient back to your practice. Hence, to conclude, you might probably win the price game at times, but you'll definitely always win the value game for sure. Thanks. And last, happy patients will actually bring in more patients. Thank you so much for your time.